Yeah, we can hear you great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, let me see if I can get my screen up here. Okay, great. Just to double check, everybody can see my slide? Excellent. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm very excited to be able to talk about some of my research. What I'll present here today, the title, as was already stated, is The Oversight of Pedestrian Infrastructure and How Planimetric Data Can Help. To get started here, I also want to acknowledge my advisor in my PhD is Dr. Wesley Marshall at the University of Colorado. So let's get started here. So pedestrian infrastructure has been fundamental and it's been around throughout history, as we all know. As you can see here, this is a picture of Pompeii. This is just outside of Naples, Italy, and this dates back to the 2nd century BC. And as you can clearly see, we have a clear delineation between where the sidewalk would be and where you would have carts, carriages, and other movement through a transportation system. And not much has really changed today. It looks a little bit different, but obviously we still have sidewalks that are present today. We still have pedestrians, and this is still a very core component to our transportation system. So as I'm sure we have all seen as we travel on a daily basis, you know, and Federal Highways has even acknowledged in 1990 that walking as well as bicycling have become forgotten modes of transportation. And this is more of what a lot of people expect to see, you know, when they're in and around cities. You know, the automobile has definitely taken over a considerable amount of space and attention in the transportation realm. And of course, vehicles definitely have their place, but as I had stated, we've acknowledged the fact that pedestrians have been overlooked. Now we're seeing some changes with this. There's an increase in advocacy groups. We're seeing an increase in cities and regions that are coming up with Vision Zero plans, that are coming up with pedestrian plans, and even pedestrian plans that are incorporated into the larger transportation plans. So this is great. This is showing that there is definitely an increase in interest. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is that there is a lack of data, especially when it comes to sidewalks. And this is noted specifically in Milwaukee's pedestrian plan. So I thought it was worth pointing this out in particular. They have an entire portion of their pedestrian plan that's dedicated to a section here where they talk about a lack of data for decision making. And within that, they talk about how sidewalks are one of the components of their transportation system that fall into this category, and it impacts their ability to make decisions. So when we look at that more than just within pedestrian planning and within cities, let's take a look at the research. So looking at literature review, what we tend to find is that within a city, you have a very small region that is often being researched. And this is once again due to a lack of available data. So what we'll see is to look at neighborhoods, to look at a couple streets. But what we're missing here is we're missing the ability to have an understanding of the entire city. So often what ends up happening in research, what they'll do to compensate for this is they'll look at roadways. And as we know, you can't necessarily equate a roadway to a sidewalk. They're very different in every city, and trying to incorporate the use of your roadway to talk about what your pedestrian infrastructure looks like can definitely lead to skewed results. So in comes planimetrics data. So the reason I'm focusing so much on the planimetric data is because we're not just looking at lines with this, we're looking at some very specific geometries here. So this gives us the capability to take this data and derive some great information on the pedestrian infrastructure. So what I did was I took this a step further and I said, I know this data exists. So let's take a look at every single city in the United States. So what I did was I looked at the time, this is some of my original research. At the time in 2017, I took an entire listing of all the cities in the United States, and I took a look at city websites, county websites, and other municipal websites that would be associated. And I looked for polygon data sets that I could make use of to kind of take it a step further beyond just what we would often see with linear data sets for sidewalks. And I came up with 24 cities. So what we're doing here is we're able to take this planimetric data, and we can take it from what was once a small neighborhood scale study, and we're doing it for an entire city. And we're going even further beyond that. And we're saying, let's take it from just being able to look at an entire city and let's look at multiple cities. So we're looking at 24 cities across the United States. So now we're getting a broader understanding in terms of geography of what this will look like, not only from small neighborhoods to bigger cities, but now for multiple cities throughout the United States. So here I just want to give an example of how we went about taking this data and normalizing it, so to speak. So this is just an average example of what planimetric data would look like. You'd have buildings, you'd have roads, you'd have sidewalks. So what we did was we found a way to isolate it so we just have our roadways and our sidewalks. And from there, we had to take it a step further. So each city has a tendency to have sidewalk data that's available on a different scale. Same thing with roadways. You have private and you have public, but every city of those 24 would be different. So some of the cities would have private and some wouldn't. Some had attribute data that made it simple to separate them and some didn't. So what we did to isolate this was we took parcel data to derive the right-of-way. And we came up with this method based on discussions with GIS groups, or GIS departments, excuse me, in the city of Denver, the city of Austin, and the city of Raleigh. And I know that I'm here with a lot of GIS professionals today. So if, I'd be curious to hear after I speak if there's any thoughts on this, or if your city or county happens to do this differently, please let me know. So how did we actually take the data in and of itself and derive the information? So what we did was we took your sidewalk area and then we created center lines, and you just do some basic math. And this gives you an average width for what these sidewalk polygons would give you. Same thing with availability. So what we would do is we take linear miles of roadway and we take linear miles of sidewalks. And the understanding that we approached this with was that there should be 2 to 1 in terms of ratio for sidewalk to roadway. So if you have a road, you would want to have a sidewalk on both sides of the roadway. So we also looked at land coverage, and the way that we approached this was we're only looking at a comparison of the area that's encompassed by the sidewalk and comparing that to the area that's encompassed by the roadway. So we're not looking at the entire right-of-way, just the area that's in it. So in this example, we're looking at how much land is being taken up by the sidewalk. And we're doing the same thing, and we're saying how much land is being taken up by the roadway. In this way, we can do a comparison to see how much land is basically being used by each type of infrastructure. So to give kind of an overview of what our results look like. So if you want to see what a city looked like that had a high overall sidewalk width, you can see here that in Peoria, there's a pretty good coverage throughout the city of wider sidewalks. And by wider, what I'm talking about is you're increasing from the minimum basis, which would be 3 foot, and I'll get into that in the next slide, all the way up to what recommendations would be of greater than 6 foot. And then you compare that to a city like Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and as you can see, there's this core section there, which is more than likely downtown, where you have wide sidewalks. And as you go outside of that, you see a considerably different layout for what your sidewalks look like in a city. And I'm sure we can all, whether we do it for travel, if we live in rural areas, or if we live there, we can definitely relate to this. So what we're doing when we're looking at these numbers, we're looking at guidelines that are being provided to us by agencies from the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a law. So the ADA is kind of that core component that a lot of cities are looking at. They're saying we need to follow the ADA because the ADA is a law. So this 3 foot is like a benchmark that is looked at as a minimum in cities, and it comes up very frequently in just about all documentation. The remainder of them is what we would call recommendations or guidelines that are coming from, from federal and national and state agencies on what our sidewalks should look like. And here you can see it goes from that 3 foot to 6 foot threshold, which once again gives you an idea of why we were looking at these different categories for the data. So moving on to what it looks like in terms of availability. Here's an example to give you sort of that binary of here's really good and here's really bad, and kind of looking at both sides of it. High availability, you can see in Corvallis, Oregon, there are sidewalks basically saturating the city, which is great to see. And then same thing in Lynchburg, you're kind of seeing that same effect that we saw with wide versus narrow sidewalks, where they all tend to be clustered. And this is more than likely what you're seeing is downtown regions, and these are probably commercial corridors for shopping. So what we're doing is we're taking this planimetric data and we're bringing some information out of that cities typically wouldn't be able to derive or have the time or the money to be able to do. So let's take a look at what the data provided for us as our results overall. So these pictures, I would imagine, are common images that we see every day. There are areas where we need to have some type of pedestrian infrastructure, walkways or sidewalks or whatever it may be. And we found the same in the results of our data. There's an overall deficiency in terms of our sidewalk availability in all cities. So we're definitely in need of some help with that. So when we talk about the coverage, on average, what we found for this availability is 50%. So when you think about 50%, let's go from just saying it as a number. So 50% means that theoretically, we have sidewalk available on average on only one side of the road throughout these cities. This is the average. And this is an example of what ends up happening. And I'm sure we've sadly seen something like this as well, almost on a daily basis. This is not far from my house. And this is what it would look like. You have a sidewalk that's obviously present on the one side of the road, and there's not a sidewalk on the other. And this creates a very dangerous scenario, especially for somebody, a person with a disability. So when we're talking about what it looks like in terms of sidewalk width, there's just over 10% of the sidewalks that failed to meet the minimum of the 3 foot ADA. So think to yourself, okay, so you can take your hands and you can put them down by your side. And you give a little extra space and you say, this is about 3 feet. This is about the area that I would need to comfortably walk as an able-bodied individual. Now let's change that scenario, and let's say you're walking with your child or your children. This is me walking my daughter. And this is a sidewalk that's a little bit less than 3 foot wide. That's narrow. And that's a little hairy when you're on a road where people are doing 35, 40 miles an hour, which isn't necessarily the speed limit, but people do drive like that. Take into consideration the picture on the left-hand side. You may have just barely enough room to walk by, but what do you do when there's an obstruction? So there's other things we need to take into consideration here. It's not just about does it exist, but what does the quality of that look like as well? See, these are things that we're currently looking into. So lastly, we had talked about looking at land coverage. So for land coverage of the 24 study cities, we found about 12% of the land, when comparing, once again, this is just sidewalks and roadways, this is not the entirety of the right-of-way, 12% is what you'll see that's encompassed by the sidewalk, and 88% is what's being encompassed by the roadway. That's, you know, I didn't go out there and measure this roadway exactly, but this gives you a pretty good visual of what we're looking at on average when we're looking at our transportation corridor. A massive section for the car and very small, narrow areas that are being dedicated to the person. This is, it can be a little overwhelming for some people. Think about if you're a child, or if you are somebody with a disability or blind. That's a lot of spaces being dedicated to a vehicle versus the spaces being dedicated to you walking. So I wanted to make sure and once again express my gratitude. You know, as a husband and a father, this is a complete career change for me, going from being a professional in the GIS industry and consulting. You know, this scholarship helps me tremendously, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to review this, give me some feedback, and also to provide me the ability to present at least some of my initial research here. I hope to come back in the future and do it again. This is the contact information for both myself as well as for my advisor. Obviously, I'm working with him as well as I go through my PhD. And I'm more than happy to discuss further, or if there's any other questions, please let me know. And that's all I have for now. And I'm not sure, Rachel, how this is playing out in terms of if we're doing questions now, or if you want to hold off and just keep moving. I don't want to take you off of your agenda time.
We're early, so we'll take some questions.
Okay.
I do have a quick question. This is Laura Atkinson. I was wondering if you found much in the way of maintenance data, or like how good the sidewalks are, just not even with their width, but if they're deteriorating. Like I'm thinking of the Park Hill neighborhood in Denver. There are some sidewalks that on paper should look kind of nice. They're not super wide, but they're okay. But they're so old that the roots have gone, some of those pieces of sidewalk are at a 45-degree angle because of the roots.
Absolutely. And that's a really good question, because that is something that we obviously can't obtain that or extract that information from planimetric data. But your original question being, did we find any information like that? Yes, some cities are taking the time to incorporate that as attribute information within their spatial data. It is a massive task for them, though. I've talked with probably about 10 different cities across the United States, and the ones who do incorporate that, it's a time and a money issue, and obviously which comes down to budget. So yes, some cities are attempting to do it. How complete their data sets are, I don't know. And I'm not sure if they even know either, because it's such a massive task and they typically don't have the budget for it. I'll kind of give just a brief amount of information of what we're currently doing, what we just finished doing for our most recent paper, which is looking at sidewalk obstructions, which plays into quality. So this doesn't get down into the nitty gritty of, you know, our tree roots, you know, buckling the sidewalk, or, you know, are they recently paved? But we're looking at least obstructions to see, as I talked about there, you may show a 6-foot sidewalk, but if you throw, you know, let's just say a light post right in the middle of that takes up about a foot, all of a sudden your 6 foot goes to less than 3 foot on either side of that obstruction, which plays into quality of what your experience is for walking. So I won't keep rambling about it, but to answer your question is, some cities do. I don't know how complete the data sets are, and unfortunately it's not something we can derive directly from planimetric data. That's a good question, though. Let me know if there's a follow-up to that based on what I said as well.
My only follow-up is, I know there's some citizen science initiatives that have been trying to do sidewalk surveys, but I know I've heard about them in the past. I'm blanking on their details or what their name is.
Yeah, and that's part of, you know, some cities are attempting to do collaborations in a sense because that is crowdsourced data in a sense. A lot of cities are trying to open it up to the people, and saying, hey, if you live in a neighborhood, download our app and tell us where you're finding deficiencies. Um, I mean, it's good. It's definitely a step in the right direction. The unfortunate thing is that, um, in my mind, and part of the reason why I'm approaching this as my topic of conversation is that, you know, we're constantly attending to our roadways and we have great data on our roadways. And I don't have anything against vehicles or trucks or anything like that. They're definitely necessary. But I think that it would be great to find ways to assist cities in being able to catch up a little bit on our pedestrian infrastructure as well. Um, so yes, that's great to point out as well. Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives taking place with nonprofits, and some cities are trying to collaborate with them to see what they can do.
Nicholas, I have a question. This is Milton. So
Absolutely.
thanks for bringing up the ADA, and you forgot senior citizens. They can get intimidated trying to cross those really
Absolutely.
wide roads. Yeah. The obviously the ADA, which I'm all for it, you know, making all the sidewalks handicap accessible, but it's one of the thousands of unfunded mandates. So I look at the town I live in, Louisville, and I realize how spoiled we are because literally the last year the city put a lot of money into building road diet, which is how to slow traffic, which is associated with safety. They took all the wide roads and they added bike lanes. And as a cyclist, I love all that. And they turned literally every sidewalk in the entire city to make it build the ramps, which are great for senior citizens or people on wheelchairs or people pushing a stroller. But the fact is that it really works for communities that are wealthy, but not for communities that are not. They have all the issues. In your analysis, did you run into some of those socioeconomic factors as well?
I did. So I actually ran some socioeconomic and sociodemographic analyses along with this, which is what we're currently working on. So what we're currently working on is looking at racial inequities as well as income inequities that may be coming from this. In the research that I showed you here today, what we found was we looked at age of cities, and this wasn't surprising. A quick background on how we did that: we took the average age of structures for buildings in the city from the census, and we took that information to get a rough understanding of how old the city was. What we found was that the older the city was, the greater the availability. But we found that the older the city, the more narrow the sidewalks tended to be. And this is actually very logical when you think about it because of the fact that older cities don't have as much space in the right of way. I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia, so you think about it, a lot of our streets are really narrow. You only have so much space to put a car, even if it's a one-way street, and then a sidewalk. So, you know, these newer cities, and Denver being one of the newer ones for sure, you got land, you have a lot of space, and you can make wider sidewalks, but they're just not as available. So that was an interesting component that we found. We also found, in terms of racial, we did not find anything in this study. However, we're digging a lot deeper into more information and greater detail in our current studies. So I'm still kind of curious to see what comes out of that. I'm trying to think of what else that we had looked at. So age, we looked at mode of transportation or mode to and from work. We found that there was the higher the percentage of people who walked to work. Interestingly enough, we found that the higher percentage of people who walk to work in these cities, the greater the availability for the sidewalk. But we also found that the lowest quartile, because we broke it into quartiles, the lowest quartile also had some of the highest numbers for availability. So what that tells us is that cities might be attempting to invest in some of these neighborhoods where they're trying to encourage people to walk. But just off the top of my head, those were three of the components we looked at. That's a great question. Anything to follow up with that based on what I told you, or?
And no, that's very good. I was just going to mention having my parents in Providence and relatives in parts of Indiana and older communities. There's also the issue of what's obstructing the sidewalk are trees, and so that it becomes a conflict between to fix a lot of those sidewalks, you had to remove the trees. So which one is more valuable? But that's a conversation for another day.
Hopefully I'll be able to present in the future. It will be on the obstructions, and one of the obstructions we looked at was trees. And it makes a considerable difference from the results we got. So yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you. Good job.
I just have one quick question before we move on to the next talk. So in your evaluation of all these cities, which one did you feel was like the most walkable?
The most so that's a that term is so walkable in terms of the criteria that we looked at. Walkability is such a, I love that word, but it's kind of all over the place in some senses with the exception of somebody like Jeff Speck. I don't know if you've ever read any of his books on walkable cities. He does a great job of really trying to focus in on what a definition for that would be. Looking at the cities that we had and the characteristics of the sidewalk that we had, obviously the city like Corvallis, Oregon was a great one, just in terms of coverage. You could see that the city was saturated with sidewalks just as much as with roadways. I believe Boulder was another one. I think Boulder was in there as well. I'd have to go back and take a look at the specifics, but those are the two that pop into my mind in terms of ones that really had great overall coverage and width. A lot of them were kind of all over the place in terms of they may have like decent availability, but narrow sidewalks, or wide sidewalks, but no availability. And these are things that we're looking to attend to in our current research, is finding ways to look at, let's not isolate them. Let's bring them together and talk about it as accessibility, because you can't just look at, if you have really wide sidewalks, that's great, but what if you have no sidewalks? So that's a big component. So we're looking at a way to sort of bring this information that we're gathering together and create more of an understanding of what the overall accessibility looks like within these cities. So Rachel, those would be the two cities that pop out in my mind. I'm more than happy to look further into it. If any of these cities in particular are of interest to anybody, please let me know.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate hearing your talk. And
absolutely, thank you for having me. Let me make sure. I think I would probably need to find a way to remove myself. Can I be overtaken, so to speak, on the sharing?
Yeah, Jackie.
There we go. Thank you again.
Okay. Next up, we've got another GIS scholarship recipient. Chandler Morehart is here with us, and he's going to tell us about his project.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. I'll share my screen here. Great. Fantastic. So I assume everyone can hear me and see my screen. If not, please wave or type in the chat box. Yeah, my name's Chandler Morehart. I received the part-time student scholarship, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you to this organization. And yeah, I'm a part-time student of GIS, so I work full-time, and luckily the GIS courses I'm pursuing are in the evenings up at CMC Leadville. So I'm still very new, only started pursuing this in January. But yeah, even just sitting through this presentation has been really interesting and eye-opening, and yeah, grateful for all the presentations we've been able to listen to so far. So I will talk about the trail map I created. I had the really unique opportunity to intersect my final project for my GIS 101 class with my job, which was great because then I could, work on it during work hours as well, which is always handy. So yeah, we'll get into it a little bit here. I live in Buena Vista, Colorado, or Buena Vista, depending on who you're talking to. And I work full-time for a summer camp called the AU Ranches. We're located about 7 miles northwest of Buena Vista, 9,000 feet above sea level. I grew up going there since I was 9 years old every summer. So it's certainly a pretty cool job to be working there full-time now. And yeah, it's an absolute dream job. So as you can see here, just a quick about me section. I'm pursuing a certificate of GIS at CMC Leadville. Just started that and hope to finish next year. Full-time camp directing for the AU Ranches in BV. I also have a degree in structural engineering from Cal Poly from 7 years ago. And after I studied structural engineering, my first job was actually in Christchurch, New Zealand, and I stayed there for 4 years, which was super fun. And yeah, not necessarily relevant to this project, but New Zealand's a cool place, and I always like to mention that. So we'll get on to the to a little bit of the property overview here. So I will play this video for you, and you can kind of read some of the just some of the bullet points over here. That's some facts about the property that I work at. But yeah, we'll get this going, and hopefully the quality is okay for everyone.
100 Elk is an outdoor center located in Buena Vista, Colorado, in Nature's Playground.
I just love the idea that kids can learn outside, learning beyond the walls of their classroom. And I think that being in this environment and being challenged to work together, to get to know themselves, to get to know their classmates, and to get to know nature. Kids grow a lot more when they can be curious and exposed to the wonders of this natural environment.
A lot of times when you're in school for a while and you're with the same peers year after year, you start having a certain expectation for yourself. And being here in the Rockies at 100 Elk, you kind of get to break down those labels. And a lot of people come and they're like, I've never talked to so-and-so, and now we're best friends.
What I like about learning outdoors in nature is that you get to do a lot of hands-on activities, and I definitely went out of my comfort zone, but it was still a lot more fun.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me see if I can get back to that spot. I thought someone might be chatting me, but it was not. It seems like it's going okay.
Labels, and a lot of people come and they're like, I've never talked to so-and-so, and now we're best friends.
What I like about learning outdoors in nature is that you get to do a lot of hands-on activities, and I definitely went out of my comfort zone, but it was still a lot more fun.
This program helps kids learn to be risk takers. You can refer back now to this experience and talk about, remember being on that high platform and you took the chance and you jumped. How about jumping down and taking the chance, but with the content?
Learning how to communicate with others is so valuable for kids because everything outside of the classroom applies back into the classroom.
I've worked with many other staff members in situations just like this, and I can tell you, this staff is some of the best ever. They're the real deal. They know their content. They know how to work with young people.
The counselors are so energetic, friendly, encouraging, safety first, and the kids like the food, which is always a good thing. There's lots of options.
Staff begin every morning with a concentrated, quiet reflection on what am I going to bring into this day that's going to change the life of this kid. Then the day starts off with appreciation for seeing the best in these kids.
Come to 100 Elk so that you can connect with your friends, make new friends, learn how to challenge each other and yourselves, and enjoy this beautiful spot in nature.
All right, hopefully that was decent enough quality. I just wanted to kind of share that to give folks just a little bit of an overview of kind of what we're all about, and especially like this drone shot right here really kind of shows some of the property. And so you'll see, you know, we're really kind of up against the slopes of Mount Columbia here in the background. We actually back up to over 1 million acres of Forest Service land, and our property's 1,100 acres. So it's a really great spot. And so, yeah, my project, which I'll get to the maps in a second, was really focused on just a better map for our trails. We get a lot of folks up here in the summer and even in the spring and the fall when we're running our outdoor education center. And a lot of, you know, teachers or parents or whoever is visiting is looking, you know, oh, I want to go on a quick run or a quick bike ride or, you know, explore the trails. And people were getting lost pretty regularly. We don't have great signage because they're all just private trails, and it's really just what our employees and our facilities team can manage. And they haven't had a chance to put up great signage. There's no existing maps along the trail or anything, and as you'll see in the next couple of slides, they kind of intersect each other a lot. So so yeah, we'll get to it, but hopefully that gives you a good preview of what our property looks like. So I am going to escape out of here real quick, and we'll hop into, yeah, so this this map right here was our existing maps. This is what we've had for a while. It's a great map for certain reasons. Oh,
you might have to switch. We're still viewing your presentation and not.
Oh, you're still seeing my PowerPoint. Okay, hang on, let me see. Oh yeah, here we go. Perfect, how's that?
That's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I must have shared just a specific window. So, right. So as I was saying, here is our existing map. This one's probably 10 years old or so. And it's a good map for certain things as far as just kind of a property layout and buildings. But as you can see, our main trail system up here was starting to get very crowded. Yeah, we've got a lot of intersecting, and none of this is to scale, and the Colorado Trail certainly isn't that smooth arc up there. And so, yeah, this is a helpful property map as far as, you know, like the cute little ropes course thing, and, you know, the cute horses in the pasture, right? Like that's all very nice, but not useful if you're trying to go on a trail run or trying to get a sense for topography or anything like that. So we're definitely still going to keep this map, but my goal is to create something that, yeah, that was a little bit more to scale and just using some of the concepts that I learned in my 101 GIS class. So we'll move over to that. Here's the one that I created. Yeah, some things to note. It's not oriented north up. It's actually oriented with uphill being up, which is just generally how we who live and work there think of the property. So I know that's a little bit unorthodox, but it works really well for us. And just, you know, you enter from the bottom of the page here on this main road, and yeah, just works really well. So yeah, as you can see, I've done just a little bit of, you know, zoom in on this specific area up here. And the reason for that is one really popular hike is to this spot called Lesson Rocks. And, you know, as you can see, this intersection right here is very, very confusing. That's pretty much where everyone gets turned around and lost. And so to be able to have this zoom in and just hand this out to folks this past summer was extremely helpful. I actually think we had maybe 1 or 2 people still get lost, but that was way less than what we normally deal with, which was great. So one of my favorite things about this is the ability to have it on your phone and actually see where you are on the map. So I was able to do that with a QR code through Avenza Maps. And if anyone has Avenza and wants to scan it, go right ahead, see if it works. I'm not sure how many people actually did that this summer. I'd have to follow up, and I'll certainly push for it a little bit more next summer as I'm handing it out to folks. But just with the way the summer was with COVID, it was, I didn't get to put as much time and energy into this map and sharing it with folks as I probably would in a normal summer. But yeah, it really was certainly pretty useful. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. I'll talk through in the legend here. I just did a couple of hiking times because you know, maybe what you can't tell, or if you look really closely in here, Harvard Lakes up here, which is along the Colorado Trail, is about 1,200 feet higher than Roundup down here. And so, you know, this, yeah, as you can see, the hiking time to Harvard Lakes via the Challengers Trail is about 1 to 2 hours, depending on how, you know, how fit you are, how acclimated you are. Harvard Lakes is up at 10,200 feet. So, so I think that that's certainly proved to be pretty helpful for folks too. I also was able to look just at, you know, which trails are closed to horses. So the Cupcake Trail, which is this orange one, doesn't allow horses on it. All of the other ones do allow horses, but horses aren't great for mountain biking trails. And also just going through some of the no vehicle access roads, just to, you know, let folks know where they can drive, but hopefully not drive as well. So that's sort of an overview of the map. I'll go through a couple of other ones. This is just the specific zoom in on Roundup, which is one of our camps. And so this goes into a little bit more detail of just that confusing kind of network area that we have. And then one super cool one that I was excited to do, we every summer we have a staff adventure race. So for all the summer counselors that come, we put on a it's like a triathlon. It's a swim, bike, rock climb, and then a run. And we never had a good map of the course. It was all just kind of word of mouth, or, you know, you kind of get lost the first time, and then hopefully for the next couple you don't get lost. So yeah, I was pretty excited to work on this. As you can see from this red square zoomed in, you start the swim right here, and then you leave on the bike course, which is purple, and you go down through this pasture and back up the road and all the way up here. I was able to include some elevation profiles as well from Strava data, which are a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see how those work. And then, yeah, and then the run course, after you climb the outdoor rock tower, you head back out on this orange course and finish back where you started. So yeah, that's some of the other projects I was able to kind of build on from this initial trail map. I'm also working now with our facilities team, now that they've kind of seen the map, working on a few other things. We're looking at possibly doing some hydroelectric power. I think we're trying to figure out if we're going to do solar or hydroelectric. There's obviously kind of pros and cons to both, but this creek right here is called Powell Creek, and we're looking at possibly installing some kind of some way to, you know, sort of power things around the property, which would be really nice. So yeah, it certainly led to some great relationships with our facilities staff. And I will go back to the PowerPoint real quick. Cool. So that's pretty much all I've got, everyone. Thanks so much for your time. I'd love to get some feedback on what everyone thinks, or comments or questions. But if you want to see some of my other projects, I included a link to my portfolio and my contact email if anybody would like to email me. I'll also just do a quick plug since I shared the video. 400 Elk, we are open to hosting business retreats or groups such as GIS Colorado. So if you guys are ever looking for a venue or trying to do some kind of fun team building stuff like you saw in the video, we'd be happy to have you. Obviously with COVID, things are a little weird right now, but maybe once we start gathering again in person, if you guys are looking for a cool venue somewhere pretty much smack dab in the middle of Colorado, which is probably good for how far reaching your members seem to be, we'd be happy to host you. So feel free to send me an email if you're interested in anything about that as well. But yeah, open it up for questions.
I have a quick question. When you're doing your trail maps, are you extending out onto Forest Service land? Because I know you're adjacent, or are you just keeping it to your property boundary?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel. I probably should add our property line to this map. I did for the hydroelectric map that I was working on recently. But yeah, we do cross over. So pretty much halfway between here, actually, I'll pull my map back up real quick so we can look at it and answer your question. So yeah, our property line is pretty much right through here. just above this kind of cluster of trails. So really these 3 trails, the Conquerors Trail, Access Trail, and Challengers Trail, are all on Forest Service lands. And it's pretty nice. We have 3 private access trails to the Colorado Trail, which is great. Yeah, and they've been there. Our property has been there since 1955, or we've owned it since 1955. So yeah.
And this is Victoria Smith Campbell from the Forest Service. So I was just wondering if you used our data or if you were using your own data. And ours is publicly available if you ever wanted it. Just so you know.
Oh, cool. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure who was talking. Sorry, Victoria. Yes, the data I use is actually just from my Strava, my running and biking up there. So yeah, but that's really good to know that that it's available from Forest Service as well. I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
And it's very pretty. So.
Thanks.
Very, very pretty.
That's my little one here too.
Nice. Awesome.
Hey, Chandler, this is Milton. So you say you've been talking to your facilities management folks. Was there an aha moment when you talked to them, like, oh, we could do this and we could do that, or this camp of this size is like a small town in many ways. So, and many small towns do use GIS for a lot more things than just, the trail. So just curious to see what the reaction was.
Yeah, Milton, that's a great question. Yeah, they are super grateful for, kind of knowing that I've been working on this on the side. They are really busy, currently in the midst of a huge forestry grant that they got for essentially cleaning up our forests. There's a lot of wonderful grant money, which I'm sure people in this group know about, for wildfire prevention, and Chaffee County in particular is really making a huge effort with what we've seen happening all over the West this summer to clean up the forest. And so they're currently doing a huge project on that. I've been talking with our lead guy about possibly mapping, kind of a before and after so that they can show things. I think at the moment they seem to be most interested in using this kind of stuff for visual presentations. Like our camp is run by a board of directors, and so any big thing we do needs to be approved by them. And so to have visual tools like this, to kind of show them what a hydroelectric project would look like is super valuable to our facilities team. So yeah.
This is Rachel. I had a question how you got the profiles of the trails then. Like the elevation gain and drop and.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that again was just from Strava. So, using the data from Strava, I just pulled up the elevation profile from, running and biking those courses, and then just screenshotted it and inserted it into the, just into here. Which is why it's a little hard to kind of see. I mean, if you really crank in there, you can see the actual, elevation profile, but these fonts are pretty small. But yeah, you can sort of see you're starting just below 8,000 or just below 9,000, going up to 9.2, coming back down. So yeah, it'd be nice to sort of learn a better way to do that eventually. But for this, I felt like just kind of showing the generic profile was useful.
Well, it looks like a really great place to work and utilize your GIS. That's fun. And I appreciate that they're maps that are 8.5 by 11, so they're probably easy for people to print out if they need to. Because I tend to make bigger maps because I love the detail, and then it's like, oh, only we can print it out then.
Yeah, that was definitely taken into consideration for sure. Just having them available in the office when people arrive, or putting them in their welcome packets in their cabin and stuff. So they've proved to be super useful. And like you said, it's a really fun place to live, work, and have as a GIS playground. So yeah.
I was slightly curious about the app that you're using to share them, because a lot of times having offline access is pretty important when you're talking about trail maps. And so I was curious your experience with that and ease of downloading it and using it.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. Yeah, I picked Avenza. It's one that I learned about through taking my avalanche course to go backcountry skiing, and so it actually has great offline capabilities because they figure when you're backcountry skiing, you're probably not going to have service. So you need service, I believe, certainly when you download the app and then scan the QR code. But then once it's saved in your phone, it'll show you on the map, even if you don't have service. So no, it's a really good question. Yeah, it's been interesting, certainly over time. Like 10 years ago, there was pretty much no service on our whole property. And now if you have AT&T, you have like full, LTE coverage pretty much everywhere there. So yeah, hopefully that isn't a huge issue for folks. But if you haven't checked out Avenza, it's a pretty awesome app for this kind of thing.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Laura, this is Nick View. I'll say one more thing. Avenza is super great. Anyone who hasn't heard of Avenza, yeah, I'll echo Chandler. You should check it out. One thing I really like about it versus a lot of the other ones like Strava or something like that is Avenza has all the official stuff on it. Like the US Forest Service publishes all their maps and the BLM publishes a whole bunch of maps. So you can get a lot of good official data from the official data sources because most of the government agencies post stuff up to Avenza PDFs.
Well, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chandler. We really appreciate, seeing the work you're doing and get to see where you hang out every day.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for letting me present. And like I said, it's just been a real pleasure to kind of see what everyone else is up to and hopefully join this industry in a more full-time capacity someday. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time, and I'll stop screen sharing now.
Okay. Are we on to our last talk, Jackie?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'll let you take over.
Sounds good. All right. So I will be your final presenter for today. I'm Jackie Phipps. I'm the GIS instructor for Emily Griffith Trades College, as well as the GIS supervisor at the City of Littleton. But today I won't be talking about any of those things. I'll be talking about my dad's squish penny collection and how we took his paper-based workflows and made them digital and more able to keep in sync. And I feel like these are kind of applicable workflows that I do at work when we're transforming our paper-based workflows to something more digital and map and web-based. So I will dive right into it. So the history about the squish penny, sometimes it's called a press penny or an elongated coin. The first squish penny happened at the World's Fair in 1893. And kind of since then, they've become really popular at different tourist destinations all around, I think, because they're really cheap to produce and super customizable. You can get, an image of your site on it and, a little memo about what you're trying to show. So they're really popular. And there's a large following of people who collect these elongated coins. So there's a large community of people that share where these machines are, and they want to know and share like what images they have and what their collections are. And my dad started collecting his pennies mostly within the last probably like 15 years. So like I said, there's many different websites that have all these different inventories. For the most part, the biggest one that we've seen was pennycollector.com. It seemed just to be the most comprehensive. It has information for all the states as well as different countries. You can click on them, see images of all of them, usually the machine and each of the pennies. Largely though, most of these sites have no mapping application. So you're just going off of a spreadsheet and you have an address to help you find it. More recently, lately, I've seen one other site that now has a web or a map component to it. On the right is the picture of my dad's inventory. So you can kind of see some check marks and him writing, I have one of 4. He would use like highlighters to say if he has them, if he has all of them. But the problem is that these machines and data sets would update often. So he'd always be reprinting it and updating it. So kind of noticing this, my brother said, hey, we gotta do something and maybe make a nice gift out of it for my dad. So we took it through the GIS workflow. You know, we asked what he needed. We figured out how to model and compute it, examine and interpret the results, make some decisions, and then ultimately share it out. So I'm going to take you through that process. So the first step was really that requirements gathering, you know, asking my dad what he needed and how he was doing his workflows. So, you know, we saw his inventorying process, which again was just like highlighting these paper sheets and, you know, looking at each of his pennies to make sure which machine they went to. The problem with these pennies is that they were stuck in this paper format. So anytime there was a change or an update, he'd have to print it out again and start highlighting it. And they change pretty frequently. So by the time he'd maybe go on a trip to a different state, he'd have to reprint it and re-inventory everything. And then kind of one of the challenges on my end was, you know, my dad worked in tech and is pretty good with computers, as well as my brother who was assisting me on this, but they didn't really know GIS. So, you know, bridging that learning curve. As far as the actual process, you know, we figured out his workflows and then we had to figure out a way to get the data. The first part was extracting it. So getting that data off of pennycollector.com. I used Excel and grabbed the information using from other sources where you can just kind of import a web page. It does a pretty good job of scraping this stuff. There was definitely some formatting and some weird errors that we had to deal with and some data formatting, especially to get it set up to geocode. In the location description on there, it would have the name of the penny machine or the location it was at and the address in the same box. So that took a little bit of data manipulation in Excel to get it out, the addresses out, and then to be able to geocode it. Some of the addresses just weren't very good. We've all probably geocoded, so we've seen address discrepancies, and you know, sometimes it would just be like a freeway exit or something like that, so not very descriptive. But largely for the most part, the addresses were pretty good to get us close enough, at least on the street of where the penny machine should be. I used free geocoding resources for this, so nothing that I had to pay for, no Ezra credits or anything like that. And the next step and the most intensive was actually taking his paper inventory and converting it to Excel. So he had them matched up pretty well. It was just figuring out how we could set up the data sets to highlight each of this. So you can kind of see in this screenshot, it says a machine number, and then it will say like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those are all of the pennies that can be associated to that machine. So at one location, you could have multiple machines and multiple pennies. So the data inventory took a while. Luckily, my brother signed up for that and he got everything into an Excel sheet, so I didn't have to worry about that part. However, the biggest challenge, and we'll kind of circle back to this, was we used ArcGIS Online for this, and at the time you couldn't do a relationship between your data set and a table. So we just had this huge data set with a bunch of fields to max out. If he got, Disney World has the most pennies. So if he got every penny from Disney World, we wanted to have a field that he could update it. So we had, hundreds of fields that he would probably never update, but we'll circle back to that. So ultimately what he needed was a way to enter his penny information as he was collecting it. So originally we started this just in a web application using an editor widget. It worked initially. I guess I also should go back. So I gave this presentation in 2017. Kind of like all workflows, they need to be reevaluated. So this is how it started. We had an editor widget where he could come in and in each field just update the penny description for it. And then we made some widgets where he could share this out. For my dad's 60th birthday, we made a big event where we asked everyone to go out throughout the year and collect the pennies. So we sent the application out to everyone. So we added a near me widget so people could see when they're traveling what pennies were near them. So we needed not only a way for my dad to inventory the data, but us to share out where the pennies are and what pennies he already has. So we made just a widget that he could, so people could find what pennies were near them, as well as just a general overview map, where you could click on the pennies and see if he already had them there or if he still needed them, and which ones he had in case they weren't all collected at the time. So originally the idea was we built the application, and I ended up actually doing some spatial analysis and took all that penny location. I figured I spent a lot of time in it and made it a part of my master's project. So I did a big tourism analysis of where these pennies were and how they associated to tourism. But my dad's data-driven decisions come to where are we traveling and where are we stopping along the routes. So he, before every trip, will print out a map of all the penny machines to make sure he won't miss any in the area. So his spatial decision-making is a little different than mine. But kind of like I said, this was in 2017 is how we spun this up. Like all workflows and things like that, they change and adapt. And I feel like to keep your users engaged and to make sure that they're still using it, you need to iterate for updates. And these can be user updates as well as technology changes. No solution's really ever complete. At the City of Littleton, every year we review our ArcGIS online content, and if a web application hasn't been updated in 2 years, we probably need to sit down with the users and look at that workflow to make sure that, hey, are they still using it, and does it have all the applications it needs for them to do this? So now I'm going to kind of go through how we iterated for some updates, both with my dad's workflows and some technology changes. So the first thing is we deployed these tools with my dad. I sat down quite a few times, going through training with him on how to edit the data and things like that. But it was a few months after we deployed it, he was getting ready to go on a trip, and I saw he had his penny collector pages printed out with highlights on it, and I was like, why do you have all those things printed out again with highlights? And he's like, oh, these are all the ones I need to go to. And I realized we didn't have a print tool with labels on it, so he didn't know how to summarize what he needed on a trip. So making sure he had the right tools, and that was really sitting down and seeing his workflow and checking in. If you deploy a solution and you don't circle back with people, they may not be adapting it and using it. So checking in and shadowing them to make sure it really is meeting their needs was really important, because my dad would have kept printing those papers out and highlighting them had I not seen this, and we figure out a way to kind of modify that. And then also the edit widget. When we started, the edit widget worked for what we needed, but it was really bulky and it was kind of slowing him down. So working together to figure out what he really needed to see and what he wanted to update. I think the biggest thing and the biggest transformation I saw when he, when he started the workflows, he was excited to do it and see it on the map, but it wasn't until probably a year later that he was really, I saw he kind of took ownership of the application. It wasn't my application that I made for him, it became his application. He had ownership, and he wanted not only to use it, but to provide feedback and to say, hey, I need these things, or this would really help me out, as well as what else can we do? So, encouraging your users to provide that feedback and take that ownership of, hey, it's actually my application that I'm using, and you're just the one kind of supporting me, I think has really helped. We have made a few things from there. We made a map series that we printed in a book so he can see all of the states and the count of pennies he has, as well as increased functionality. It's, hey, can we integrate it into this? Or can we do that? And my dad doesn't email me very often, but I can tell when it's an email for an update, because it'll be very formal, and then it'll be about 4 paragraphs of like the updates or things that he would like to see improved, which I think is great. He's taking, you know, that ownership piece and providing his feedback, and then we work together to see how we can better the application for his uses. I talked about some of the integrations. So originally when I deployed the solution, we were using the editor widget. However, kind of realized that there were a few things limiting with that, and I switched it to a Survey 123 form to allow for some automation and some of this integration. So my brother, we have some friends that are just very curious about my dad's penny collector data set. And so we thought it would be kind of fun to have some integrations using these web hooks in Survey 123, where it could just tweet out when he has new pennies. So people could just kind of follow his collection informally through Twitter. So I use Interomat for this integration, but you can also use like Microsoft Flow. I examined both of them and just ended up with this, but it can create a webhook through your Survey 123, and it will listen for updates or submittals, and then it can trigger a bunch of reactions. So it could send an email, it can do all these things, but we had decided on Twitter at the time. It was pretty easy to set up, although there were some limitations. It would only update the fields that you were updating. And so for a large part, we already had the data set. My dad would only update a few things, so it was kind of missing some of the information we wanted to send across. So it largely worked for the most part, although the feed to Twitter became a premium feed, so you had to pay for it. So we'll probably be scraping that integration and moving to maybe something like Facebook or something where we can use the free platform still. In addition to, you know, taking that ownership was just additional data updates. So when I first created the application, we pulled all the data from Penny Collector, and I'd originally been thinking, oh, well, we're probably going to want to integrate it so it's updating all the new machines to this to our application. We've kind of scraped that. My dad's pretty good about manually going in and updating it when he's going on a trip or hitting a new machine, so I haven't spent my time on that piece yet, but we have gone through and updated areas as needed. So we traveled to the UK a few years ago, and then to Canada. And so when one of us is going on a big trip to a different country or an area where we don't have pennies, I'll go through and do that same process of scraping the site, geocoding it, and then plugging it into the machine. Geocoding was a little bit more complicated outside of the US, just because I wasn't as familiar with the like free geocoders and things like that, and don't like to pay credits to use Esri's. So those proved a little tricky, but it's been nice to be able to update those. And then with kind of those foreign travel needed to make the data sets be available offline. So we could see it in not a collector application, because we don't really edit it in there. We just bring them back to my dad and give him the pennies. So like at the Explorer application, where we can see where the machines are in an offline environment. So that really helped traveling and being able to access those. The biggest data update that we recently did was a related table. You know, since each penny machine or site that has machines can have multiple pennies, that big data set with, you know, hundreds of rows of pennies he would never use really wasn't working, and it was just kind of bulky and slow. So with some increases in technology, ArcGIS Online now allows you to have a related table. This has helped kind of respin up the application using this relationship, and then yeah, kind of can represent the data, although it also has some limitations using it. So we also have his technology updates, kind of along with the upgrade to related tables being available on ArcGIS Online, was the ability to have views. So when we first published this application, it was in a public setting, so anyone technically could have come in and edited his data, since we didn't have the ability to have an editable table and an uneditable view of that. Now ArcGIS Online has views, so we can have his main data set in a format that he can edit it in, but have the same thing in a view. So when we push it to a public or have it in that publicly available application, it's not in editable form. So that's been really helpful. And then like everything else, things break. So about 2 months ago, he sent me a big email of his laundry list of things he needed, which mainly was that the related tables. But and then about a month ago, he sent me an email that how he was editing them in Survey 123 stopped allowing edits. So in the last 2 weeks, kind of updating all of this with the views and Survey 123. So just like everything else, tools break and you have to update them. I'm sure he's not as happy with my SLA time on returning his break fixes, but yeah, it's a free service to him, so I think it's okay. And then creating more applications. So I'm gonna kind of go through why I ended up using Survey 123. So originally we had that editor application. Upon seeing better things, I thought Survey 123 would be a little bit easier. It has automation, so we could run field calculations, so it would actually calculate the number of pennies he had, where before he would have to do it manually and he would kind of forget to do that field. Survey 123 has really nice analysis tools. So you can see like the chart on the top has the pennies he has from each state, and it just auto does these. I think one of the limitations is they're only in the background view of it, so just the person creating the application can really see these. There's no way to publicly share them. The data tables are easy to use, and they have a really easy way to edit the form within it, which is how he ended up doing the editing for a while. And kind of like a lot of other ArcGIS Online stuff, you can trick the URL to open certain records or edit them, which we'll get into a little bit more here in a sec. So the first iteration, I used Survey 123 Connect. So using their Excel forms to add a little bit more of that functionality. You can see there's a ton of fields, and these were for his pennies. So the Survey 123, instead of showing the hundreds of fields that he could enter a penny in, would only show the next field if it had a penny in the first field. So if he had penny 1 filled out, then penny 2 would pop up for him to edit. So it just allowed a more dynamic form and entry, as well as some of that field calculation. Like I said before, about a month ago, he emailed me and he would use this button to edit, and it stopped allowing him to edit. So I recently republished it having that related table. This allowed us to have less fields. So there's significantly less fields of data that he has to enter because of this relationship. We still have some automatic calculations, which are really helpful. However, the method he was using to edit and enter his inventory was now broken because of this repeated or relationship to the data table. So I had to figure out how we would go around that. So we ended up using a dashboard with Survey 123 editor form into it. This makes it so he can still filter his data, which is what he likes to do by like state or city, and then populate the record for the machine that he's trying to update, as well as have some of that summarizing information. So this is a quick layout of the dashboard. We have a map down here, so he can explore it that way. This is the machine details, the penny details that relate to the machine, a quick list for him to filter and click on which machine he wants to edit. When he clicks on one of these, it will pull up the Survey 123 form, of that record to edit it. So when he finds a penny, or when he gets a new penny, he can find the machine or the location information, open up that record, and then start entering the pennies. It will show how many pennies he's collected and how many he has overall. So he can filter by state or city. Is some of the limitations, I think, currently with the dashboard and some of the things with the relationship is it's hard to have some of those sync up as if they were in the same table in some of these applications, so you can't necessarily see all the information you want in the pop-up or filter based on some of these with that relationship. But I think getting a little better at arcade functions will help increase that relationship of what I can show either in my pop-ups or in the data tables. Again, there's always more. When we were kind of go over these changes, he said, I have this Google Drive now with all of my photos of the scanned pages I have of my pennies, so can we figure out how to integrate that? So, it's, again, never a done solution. You got to keep reevaluating and reiterating what you're doing. And so I think the biggest lessons I learned from going from paper to digital is, make sure you understand that workflow up front, get those functional requirements, and, check in with your users as you're creating the process so they can start to get that buy-in, provide training, more training, and then be ready to answer any questions. Making sure people know how to use the tools, half the battle. And then, figuring out how to get that buy-in and that ownership of that application so they feel comfortable making suggestions or feedback. Shadow them to make sure that they're using it right and that you understand all their needs, especially after the application's been developed and out for a while. And make sure you're checking for those tech updates because they may help improve your workflows and what your users can do. So next time you're going on your vacation, make sure you have a roll of quarters, your fresh pennies, and then your inventory map so you know what to collect. On the image is my dad's penny book. I don't really think it's a book at this point. I'm not quite sure what it is. But yeah, are there any questions?
Hey, Jackie, this is Milton. That was pretty amazing. So you mentioned several times talking to the customer and so on, shadowing the customer. And obviously, in this case, the customer is your dad. So I imagine there's a whole level of, typically when you deal with your customers, even if they're upset, you keep certain level of civility. How is it with your customer being your dad?
Yeah, it's definitely different because I can at least be harsher with him or tell him, no, I can't do that, or no, I don't have time to do that. But I think that the hardest thing with him being the customer was the training piece. And, I think any training you have to have a lot of patience for with your users. But my patient, when he would be like doing something wrong, or we'd just go over something and you'd, mess it up again, I'd, probably be slightly more frustrated. So, a little different dynamic than in the normal workforce.
I have a question. Do you have any plans to sort of offer this out to other penny collectors to keep their collections?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it too much. My brother thinks that we should do it, but I'd be happy to send anyone the survey 1, 2, 3 of the layers that we've used for it, so you can spin up your own.
Hi, Jackie. I had a quick question for you. That was great, by the way, especially the last picture, so we could actually see what his full collection looked like. Yeah. I'm curious, thinking about this. Obviously, you're using that analogy almost in a sense of, your father being a client in a sense, and thinking about this coming back from the consulting perspective. How did your dad feel about the end product of this, so to speak, in terms of was he happy to have spent the time doing it? Does he think it was a worthwhile venture? Does he find this to be more efficient and helpful? as opposed to his manual version from before. I'm sure everything was probably handwritten, and he had his own documentation format.
Yeah, I think at the beginning it was definitely, since it was like a surprise birthday present, I think learning the workflows and stuff at first was definitely a little hesitant, and I don't think he really saw the whole application and like why he would want to do this. But I think as he got more familiar with it, he definitely liked it and realized it was a lot easier than going in and updating things. And so now, you know, with this latest iteration of Survey 123 and having to edit in the dashboard, the first thing he said to me was, is this faster? Like, can I edit the data faster? And it was, you know, it's like, well, like, I think this will load faster, but this won't. So like now he's all in on it and loves it. But it definitely was met with like just a little bit of resistance in the beginning, like, why did you guys spend all this time doing this? But now he's sold on it. And if it doesn't, like when the editor wasn't working, so usually we go on trips and we don't buy my dad gifts anymore. We just bring him pennies back from wherever we've been. But this year with COVID, we haven't been able to go anywhere. So my brother for Christmas, or for his birthday, went on eBay and just bought a bunch of pennies. And that's right when the editor broke. So like now when the editor breaks, it's like, hey, you gotta fix it. So he's definitely all in now.
That's great. I would just like to echo what a lot of people are saying, that this is a great idea for presenting workflows. And I would totally agree. Sometimes when you use something that's a little more lighthearted, it makes it more engaging, more interesting, and a little bit easier to absorb a lot of times, depending on your audience. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think there's been a few questions of how many pennies my dad has. So he has 3,679 pennies. The one thing I haven't done yet on this is I haven't converted how much money he's actually spent on this or had other people spend on this. So each penny usually costs 51 cents typically. So I was gonna make a widget up here that not only says how many he spent, but how much money he's I wouldn't say wasted, but that might be a term for it. But yeah, let's see. I do not know how much that book weighs. It's probably far too much. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything?
No, I want to, what you just talked about, each penny is 51 cents. That whole return on investment is a whole different conversation, because it's not just how much it costs for each penny, is how many thousands of dollars on all the trips.
Yes.
Of course, you had fun and memories. So anyway, fun topic.
Yeah.
Have you thought of adding a widget for how many trees saved, since he's not printing anymore?
No, but that's a very good one. I'd have to figure out what that would be, but it'd probably be a lot since he's not printing them anymore. Yeah, well, thanks for listening to me talk about my dad's penny collection. I'll actually flip it back too. Yes, so if there's no other questions, we kind of just have a social hour planned right now. If anyone wants to, kind of just discuss what people are working on or anything cool and new in their GIS world.
I'll start off. So this is Rachel. So I work as a GIS specialist for Montezuma County, Colorado. It's in the southwest corner of Colorado. So we're a very rural community. I think our county has 26,000 people. That's our population. And so one interesting thing that our GIS department is doing right now, we are seeing an influx of people moving here because of the pandemic. People are realizing they can work from home more, they can live where they want to. And so I think there's a mass exodus from cities and from the Front Range in particular. So a lot of our vacant lots are being sold to to put houses on as people move here. So we're looking at what is our capacity for growth? You know, what do we have enough water if our population doubles or triples? You know, and I think that's a concern all across Colorado, is whether we have enough water to sustain our population growth here. And then I don't know if you guys have looked at a lot of the drought maps, but our area is always the highest in the drought category for the state, because we're right where the desert meets the mountains. So it's been a really, really interesting project, just trying to understand water rights and capacity for population growth. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
I can go ahead and do an update. This is Laura Atkinson, board member for GIS Colorado. And for those of you who've known me for the last couple of meetings, I am finally no longer in school. I have the double masters are finished and I'm done, and no, I'm not going to get a PhD. I've worked for the BLM and doing sage grouse monitoring. And my world recently has been debugging models and converting some of our workflows that are currently using just models and tools into web applications to make them a little bit easier for field offices to use. So that's what I got.
Well, congratulations, Laura. If you guys don't mind, I'll kind of step in here for just a quick second. And once again, congrats, Laura. That's a huge undertaking, and yeah, I know what it's like being in school. So I'm sure you're probably very happy to be done. I just wanted to follow up. I know I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to talk today, and I say thank you for that. The reason why I kind of wanted to step back in here again real quick. Research is interesting and fun, and I'm very happy to be doing this. And I know there's a very real purpose to what we do in terms of writing research and to doing our research. My goal, though, is to aim for something that's a little bit more on the practical side in terms of how can I take what it is that I'm doing and how can I communicate this to help. Your research only goes so far if all you're doing is aiming for, doing things such as this, and it's fun and exciting and I love doing it. But I want to be able to make use of what I'm doing to work with, for instance, the cities that I'm researching. So I know there are a lot of people who are present here today, or at least some that are working in these industries, whether you work with a city or a county, or if you work with an industry that ties into transportation. I'd be curious if anybody had any feedback for me on that. I love being able to present to this. That's in a format like this. It's one way for me to be able to reach out to people indirectly. But I'd also be curious just to hear some feedback as to how I might be able to do that in a more direct manner. Or if you have any ideas that you'd be willing to throw out there to me for what else I might be able to do to sort of bridge that gap, take it from just writing papers and doing research at a university and really making this real world application and seeing how I can help.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of feedback. Sorry, my screen's on a different computer than my camera, so if I'm looking at the wrong place, forgive me.
I'm doing the same.
But one thing you might want to consider here in Colorado specifically, one of the things that we have are our special districts. So, we have, 2,500 special districts or more. And part of that is a lot of times our smaller entities that are dealing with things like recreation and parks. So we have a number of park districts. I know that in my volunteer job, not my day job that I get paid for, I'm on the board of a special district. We actually finance, here one second. Josie, can you please take that upstairs? Kids. Pandemic. But we do have our, we've actually paid to develop the planimetric data for our park district because it was one of the holes in Jefferson County. And these areas are usually unincorporated. So they're not cities, but we're within the counties. And a lot of people are starting to focus on trails, trail connections, walking connections. You know, looking at places like the Jeffco Trails connections. It's not exactly urban development, but these are going to be the smaller districts that don't have GIS staff. And they're going to be the smaller areas that are looking at how do we buy land or find ways that we connect people on trails or bike paths. You know, we're trying to figure out where we can have trail connections like Clear Creek Crossing, the Peaks to Plains trails. And we're encountering these issues with CDOT bridges versus county roads versus city roads, because we cover all of those kinds of areas. So special districts are a neat opportunity. I think they also provide the fact that they're smaller, so they usually don't have their own GIS shops. So more that consulting kind of basis. And they tend to have just a little bit different of bent where they're looking on connecting people. Usually in those areas like my neighborhood where half of it's sidewalks and half of it isn't. And that's why I convinced my board to pay for the planimetric data, because when we went to go do some analysis, there wasn't any for that part of the DRCOG area. So we just closed the hole for that little portion of Jefferson County. I know it's kind of an odd one, but
not at all. Not at all. I'm curious, is the data made public or is it in-house only?
It's the DRCOG data, so I believe it is.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So DRCOG just had a hole in our park district. It just happened to be my neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
So we are paying in the next round to fill in that hole for our park district so that we can.
Okay.
When we did our master plan, the number one thing that came back is trails connection, even though we don't actually manage most of the trails in our region or our area. So we've been trying to become advocates for trail connections.
Oh, great. So now, if I understand what you said correctly, you've worked with Ashley Summers, I'm guessing, and DRCOG, and you'll now be incorporated in the next round of imagery and planimetry. That's fantastic. I'm curious in terms of on my end, from the researcher / student end, have you reached out to universities even to see if there's a lot of students I know who are often looking for projects, you know, and I'm not speaking for myself in particular, but I'm sure you could find some very informed students who are capable of doing a lot of the tasks that you guys have at hand.
Yeah, so putting on my Forest Service hat as the Forest Service Regional Geospatial Coordinator, we have worked with some of the local universities, including UC Denver. So with and we're actually, I think there's a Mobilize Green actually has a position out that we will be hiring for the spring cohort of resource assistants. So I should probably go grab that web link and throw it in there, but we will be hiring someone to be doing spatial analysis with trails from the Forest Service, which is my paid job. And for my volunteer job, quite honestly, a lot of the times I just do GIS for them, unless it's like a major thing. We have very small areas, and when we get the planimetric data, I would like to have someone do a project for us from the universities. But until we get that data, we don't have a whole lot to be looking at. And we have consultants who do a lot of our planning and analysis and that sort of stuff.
Well, great. I mean, I'll even throw it out there if you would ever be interested, I'd be more than happy to show what I've done If there is an interest in looking at the sidewalk data, because Dr. Cog is one of the data sets that I incorporated. So please feel free to reach out. I'll actually send you a chat with my email address again. I'd be happy to talk and just give a presentation if you guys just want to get an idea for how you can use that planimetric, because what you stated is what I've run into with a lot of the cities I talk to and counties, is that they spend a considerable amount of money for planimetric data, and they use it for something such as calculating impervious surface for taxation for water runoff, or I can't remember the exact terminology they used. And I thought to myself, that's really a shame to spend that much money just to determine a specific impervious surface within your city or county so that you can tax people. And now you have this fantastic data set that just sits, and you could do so much more with it. So I'll send you my email address. I'd be happy if you guys were ever interested. I'd do a presentation or just to chat. Just let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Nicholas, this is Milton, and I'll add, in a lot of places, the whole pedestrian component, they go hand in hand. It's bike and ped. It's not just pedestrian, but, look for those that are doing both of them because they're related, either connecting trails or MPOs, metropolitan organizations like Dr. Cog. Those are really a lot of the folks that are doing the planning as it relates to bike and pedestrian. But I extend the offer like I share with you privately. So my company does have an academic program, and we make our data available at no cost as long as it is for non-paid research. But some of the analysis that some of our customers are doing is just because you build it doesn't mean people come. So in many cases, communities do want to verify that if we add this bike lanes, are people actually using it? Some communities are looking at the data first before they build it. So, and it relates to some of the work that Jackie explained in her previous session. Just because you design it this way doesn't mean people actually use it. So you go back to the customer and get feedback. So some of our communities are using our data to look at where people are actually walking and where they're actually cycling, overlay that to where they have infrastructure for that kind of thing, and whether or not people are using those things. So anyway, that might be of interest to you as well.
It definitely is, and thank you again for extending that offer and also for pointing that out, because I would say that has been on the top of my list of where my interests were, even when I started my PhD, a couple of years ago. It's difficult to find the type of data that you offer through Streetlight. It's very difficult, especially at that scale. So I very much so appreciate you extending that offer, and I've already been talking with my advisor. It's of great interest to us from an academic standpoint, and it can shed a tremendous amount of light on just taking it from, once again, just looking at infrastructure to understanding how it serves the people, which it circles back to what I was originally opening up this conversation, where my interest was. It's great to look at things, it's great to have papers, it's great to have infrastructure, but it does no good if you can't communicate that or find out if it's being used. So thank you, appreciate it.
Hey, Nicholas, this is Nick View again. You might want to check out an organization that I've done a lot of work with over the past half dozen years, is the Trust for Public Lands. I don't know if you've heard of them, but basically, yeah, we work to create parks, green space, trails, all that type of stuff in urban environments. And I would think we have a lot of overlap in what we do, because I've seen, I've worked with a lot of cities across America over the past 5 years, and we always pull their planimetric data, whatever they have, to analyze a lot of what you're talking about, trail connections, where are there socioeconomic demands and demographic demands for things like parks and trails, and there's gaps in between those things. So I would definitely encourage you to look at Trust for Public Lands, and if you I definitely encourage you, if you want to chat, shoot me a note or something. Yeah, I'd love to follow up offline with you, just chat about some of the projects I've done, some of the ways that we have at Trust for Public Lands use this type of data to, encourage real world decision making.
That would be great. Thank you, Nick. I'll send you my email as well. I'll send you a quick chat, but I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah.
I can jump in and say hi. This is Rachel Piersdorf. So I recently switched jobs, so I'm now at Dr. Cog as a GIS analyst. I don't think I could speak to the planimetrics in this context as much, but Ashley would definitely be the person to reach out to about that. But I just want to thank everyone who put this event on. I really enjoyed all the presentations, and also as someone from the scholarship committee, it was great to see our scholarship recipients presenting here, and really appreciated seeing those presentations. So yeah, thanks again. Good to see you all.
I just wanted to say real quick, this is Victoria Smith Campbell with the U.S. Forest Service, my day job. I'm the regional GIS coordinator for the Rocky Mountain region. I did want to express to everyone here that the Forest Service did acquire the stereo imagery through the NAEP program for Colorado. Now, keep in mind, it's about 20 plus terabytes of data, so it's not small. But we do have it. And if anyone is trying to do stereo imagery, trying to do measurements, we purchased it. It is free. The BLM and the Forest Service partnered. We split it 50-50. And I know that the orthos and this was the 2019 NAEP Collect, were also purchased, and we have those. We've just been distributing them to our Forest Service units. But I know a lot of folks here are local government. And I know a lot of folks here are looking for those kinds of products. They can be purchased through vendors. The vendors are awesome. We have nothing against them. We love them. They did a great job. But if you have any smaller projects or things like that, and you're looking for, I just wanted folks to know that that stereo imagery is available, and that it is, I believe, public domain since it is purchased through the NAEP program. So the other thing in the Forest Service that we've been doing is digitizing our film collection that we have of aerial photos. They are not georeferenced, but we have some going back to the 1930s. So I have like 1937 imagery of the city of Golden. We have Steamboat, we have a lot of ski areas from the 60s. So we've been working to get that digital. It is a high resolution scan that is being done by contractors. We're getting pretty close. Our project data, we do not have flight line stuff for. So it's an adventure. Like I'm gonna send a bunch to Gunnison County and just wish them well. And if you ever do a reference them, please give them back. I just don't have the staff to do it right now. But our film has been deteriorating. We have about 600 rolls of mostly 9x9, you know, and this is not the stuff that was like the forest resource photography. So some of it's like the flood in Rapid City, South Dakota, 1972. So just wanted to let folks know that that's one of the things we've been working on. And if folks are looking for the NAEP data, I know that there are ways that it is distributed. A lot of people get it. But in the meantime, I have to run, my kids yelling, and I will be back. So for questions in a minute.
Is there anyone on here from the state, from the governor's office, OIT? Okay, because I wonder, as a county, GIS person, you know, we spend our whole time just perfecting our data, but then I feel like bigger entities who are working regionally, they have trouble accessing good data for areas. And I would love to see the state kind of be more proactive in collecting all of our statewide data, really formatting it in a cohesive way and having it available. But I don't know how we put pressure on the state for that. I don't know, that's just a thought I had.
I know that they do that on at least for parcels and address points, and it's a pretty big lift for them.
Okay, yeah, because I'd love to see it for imagery. You know, our county just paid for high resolution imagery, and we can only afford to get the municipalities, and we only can do that every 5 years. But it'd be nice if we could get more partners and kind of get statewide imagery on a regular basis that's better resolution than 1 meter.
Well, there's at least, Rachel, 2019 60 centimeter NAPE imagery for Colorado. I could actually send you, I have some uploaded online right now. I could send you a download link for 60 centimeter 2019 Montezuma County NAPE if you want, like right now.
Okay, great. Well, I guess if we don't have much more to share, I'm fine wrapping this up, and I really appreciate everyone participating and listening in, and thank you all for being here, and thanks for the people who presented. Just a reminder, our winter meeting is going to be January 20th and 21st, and so if you guys want to present then, don't feel intimidated. It's great to see all kinds of ways that GIS is being used to answer those questions out there. Jackie, if you have anything to add?
No, yeah, thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, like, you know, even if you think you have a small project or something that, you know, was really random, like your dad's Squish Penny, you know, this is really a great platform to present and, you know, share stuff, even if it's just a short 10-minute presentation, a very receptive audience as well. So definitely suggest all you guys try and get a presentation in.
And it counts towards your GISP too, if anyone's trying to get that license. And also I in my capacity on the board, I can produce a letter to prove how long you've been a member of GIS Colorado, because that counts as points towards your GISP certificate as well.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.